Welcome to the 2025 Dialogue, a masterclass series by the HR Association of India. I am Neha Jagnani, and today we are leaning into a theme that's as urgent as it is transformative: breaking the bias barrier. And to guide us through this, we have with us Mr. Sumit Agarwal. Sumit is a celebrated SDG DEI ambassador and motivational speaker, embodying a vision for diverse workforces. Recognized as a LinkedIn top voice for DEI, he is revered for his transformative HR practices. Aligned with India Diversity Forum, ISTD, and NHRDN, Sumit's endeavors fuel progressive HR practices. As the founder of the Link Tribe, he channels his DEI expertise to enable professionals to network and grow through LinkedIn. Sumit, thank you so much for joining. It's a pleasure having you.
Yeah.
So, very excited for this masterclass, Sumit. To begin with, my first question to you is, what are some of the most common unconscious biases that you have seen in workplaces, and how do you think they quietly shape decision making?
See, when we talk about bias now, people think it's loud, but I think bias is very quiet, and it is in conversations where we say that, oh, this person is not the right fit. Look at that woman. She came to the interview wearing a sari. Don't you think her attire should have been a little more corporate? So these are the kind of conversations, if you look at, these empowers bias, right? Um, if we look at different types of biases, there are around 14 to 16 types of biases which are currently recognized. I'm going to talk about three most important types of biases which I have come across.
Sure.
First is the disability bias, where me as a person with a disability, people always thought that he can't do anything because he's a person with a disability. Disability became my whole identity in that case. When I walked into the office of a client and I said that I'll be able to handle your LinkedIn, but I won't be able to do it below rupees 50,000. He said, I'll give you 25,000. Be happy with whatever you are getting because you are a person with a disability, right? So that is disability bias, that we should be happy and grateful about whatever we are getting because we are a person with a disability. Then it becomes a charity case कि जो दे रहे हैं ले लो, इससे ज्यादा नहीं मिलेगा, right? Second type of bias is generational bias, which we see a lot, especially in the Indian context, and it is a double-edged sword, right? Um, At offices, we see that, oh, you're a fresher, go get me that cup of coffee. And so, yeah, we have an inherent bias that freshers or trainees are good for getting cups of coffees and printing files, right? Their ideas are not appreciated, right? Anything they bring to the table is just one another piece of paper, which never gets worked on, right? The other side of the coin is when you look at ageism, right? Oh my God, that person doesn't know how to use AI. Anybody who's above 45, you are outdated because AI is going to outpace you. आपको चैट जीपीटी नहीं आता है? क्यों नहीं आता है? Then how are you going to be a part of this workforce? Right. So anybody who's, you know, at that side of the coin also gets the talk that you must be updating yourself. And XYZ is firing 12,000 people, and this company is firing 15,000 people. You might be a part of this next time if you don't update yourself. So this is generational bias. Even there's a saying around it that you can't teach an old dog new tricks, right? So all of these proverbs, this shows our mentality, right? The third kind of bias is affinity bias, which happens a lot. Oh my God, he's from Harvard. Oh my God, he's from IITs and IIMs. Right? He has to be definitely an amazing candidate, right? Because he's from the elite colleges, right? I myself have seen that, right? As a part of an experiment in 10 companies, I divided it to five and five, right? In five places, I said I am trained by the UN. I'm trained under the UN, right? I am trained from UN Women. I am trained from ILO. I am trained from the UN Women Staff College. I'm also trained from the UN Support Staff College, right? I've done courses, right? Wherever I've mentioned that, I have been hired as an advisor. When I did not mention that, only one person out of five gave me the assignment. So this is affinity bias. This is not whether I can do the job or not. This is just affinity bias. Right?
Sure.
So affinity bias happens a lot. The CEO or the CHRO wants to hire people who are very similar to her or him, right? Um, so that becomes a problem. In some industries, people tend to hire more women because they think that in hospitality, in airlines, in other industries, they think that women are more suited because they're caring, nurturing, XYZ, right? So there you don't see a lot of men. So bias exists in all forms and all kinds. It's not just you're not hiring women, so it's a bias. You're not hiring men, that's also a bias.
Sure.
So yeah.
Absolutely. Great insights, Sumit. Good examples, and the top three, the few of the many biases was disability bias, generational bias, and affinity bias. Thank you so much for your insights. What I could understand is biases doesn't always shout. They are those whispers, that they are the things that are mostly quiet and which we don't realize when we are making a decision. So thank you so much for your inputs. My next question, Sumit, is how can leaders identify their own biases without being defensive?
Oh my God, leaders being biased. They will never admit that they're biased. Nobody wants to admit. Will you admit that you're biased? Should I admit that I'm biased? We don't want to. We are not wired to admit that we are wrong, right? Especially in the Asian culture, in Indian culture. Especially if you are in a senior position. आप आके बोल ही नहीं सकते हो कि मेरे से गलती हो गया आई वांट आई एम सॉरी nobody is going to say that, right? Because senior management is always right? There are three things. I had my own biases. I was not free of biases. I still am not free of biases, right? If you say that you are free of all biases, that's a bias, right? So I had a bias, conformity bias. I believed my own belief that because I'm a person with a disability, any company's leadership will never take me seriously, right? And today, I advise most of the Fortune 500 companies, and they do take me seriously. They implement all of my suggestions, right? So first is you have to ask yourself very hard questions. What do I mean by hard questions? You have to ask that who takes up most of my time? Which are the kind of people I promote? Which are the kind of people I mentor? Am I mentoring somebody who's from the marginalized communities? Are they getting enough of my time? Which are the kind of colleges do I hire from? Do I only tend to hire people who are very similar to me? Right? So once you start asking these hard questions, you can introspect and reflect, right? That needs to be done where the leadership asks themselves very hard questions, right? So there's a structure called there's a thing called nine whys in liberating structures, right? And where you ask nine times why till you get to the core of the problem, right? So that is something which you who should do in when you are reflecting on yourself, right? Because I don't have more women in the company. Why? Because I'm not able to find women talent. Why? Because I'm not able to look at colleges which actually have female engineering students. Why? Because or maybe I'm not able to choose from those engineering colleges which has more females. Why? Again, you are able to connect to the core of the problem. Where is the process going wrong? Right? That's number one. Number two is the second step is you have to acknowledge that, okay, I have inherent biases, I have blind spots, and I need to do 360 surveys about it, right? I need to do 360 surveys about it. And how can I make it better? For example, there's a lot of companies internationally which follow blind hiring. What do I mean by blind hiring? You don't get to see the names. You don't get to see where they're from. You don't get to see their pin code locations, right? Because there's something called a pin code bias, where if the company is from Calcutta, you underpay them. In cities like Delhi and Bombay, you underpay because Calcutta is considered to be a quote unquote cheap city, right? So there's even a pin code bias, right? So you cover those parts of the CV which are not mandatory, only show whatever is mandatory, and then you have reduced bias, right? You don't know the names of the candidates, whether it's a male or a female, you don't disclose the names, right? You get to know the candidate once your decision hiring decision is final. Okay, that I am going to hire the candidate. Right? Third is you have to first make a core council of advisors from different communities. Once you acknowledge that you have your biases, you have to have your council of trusted advisors who point out to you and say that okay, this is where you are wrong. And you don't need to accept that. You have to check on it. Whether the person who's saying that I'm wrong, is he or she saying for their own biases? Because I might say something is wrong and I might be saying it from my own bias. So you have to have a system in place where you have to have different perspectives before you take a decision. Right? Then you cover all your blind spots. You have to have a trusted council of advisors. Like there was a story where there was a knight called Arthur, and he had his council of knights, council of advisors, and there was this wizard called Merlin who was supposed to be very wise. And you have to have that kind of council.
Right. So great insights, Sumit. Just to highlight the 3 points that you have mentioned is asking the hard questions. This is what leaders can do to probe deeper into what is it that is going wrong, including asking the why element. Next is acknowledging the bias, and last but not the least, making the counselor trusted advisors. So thank you so much for your insights. My next question, Sumit, is what role does empathy play in dismantling deep-rooted systemic biases?
See, systemic bias is faceless, right? It's not just done by one person. It's done by a system. How does systemic bias, why is systemic bias there? If I ask you why is systemic bias there, I'll tell you why is systemic bias there. Systemic bias is there because the world was designed for men. The world during the World War One, World War Two, and then the Industrial Revolution, the world was designed for men, right? Not people with disabilities, not LGBTQ, not women, just white, able-bodied men, right? And that's how the world was designed. So when you put somebody who doesn't conform to the sameness, right, then comes change, right? So systemic inequalities exist because of A, infrastructure, because of B, policies, because of C, mindsets, right? So there are three main reasons to this, right? And when you put empathy into the mix, you suddenly give it a face, right? Instead of reading a 50-page DEI report about what your organization has done, if your CEO comes and listens to the story of a single father who's taking care of his uh, child, right, after going back from office, right, he will be able to know more about the problem than reading a 50-page DEI report, right? So, empathy connects people. It gives it a face. Systemic bias is faceless. Empathy gives everything a face, right?
Right. Right.
So, you have to humanize the entire thing. Right? So, empathy is the key to humanity, right? And that is what the definition of an organization should be. Because any organization, if you look at the Companies Act, is regarded as a living entity, right? They are, by law, they are regarded as a separate entity, right? So, so if you are considering it as a living, breathing entity which has its own mission, vision, and everything, shouldn't it have also a little bit of empathy and humanness? Yeah.
Absolutely, Sumit. So empathy is something that bridges the gap between I don't see it, the things which are unseen, versus now I understand that this is there. So thank you so much. Beautifully put. This brings us to the last question, Sumit, which is if an organization wants to start breaking barriers today, what's the first concrete step that they should take?
So if I look at, you know, breaking barriers, right? Your first step is to have a courageous conversation. Right? Be that person. You don't need to be the CEO or CHR to make a decision. Just be the person that, okay, I don't see a person from the LGBTQ community or a person with a disability in my organization. Why is that? Are we having some problems in hiring them, or is the organization not supportive enough to hire them? Do we have to conform with the traditional definitions of normal? Right? Most of the time, what I've seen is organizations want to hire people with disabilities. They want to hire people from the LGBTQ community. They have two objections. One is accommodation cost बहुत ज़्यादा होगा. Accommodation costs will be too much, right? Second is we have to change a lot of policies. We have to do a lot of sensitization and all of that. And the third is, you know, we just don't have that bandwidth right now. The productivity will decrease. The productivity of overall team will decrease. What I have seen working with so many companies, right, when you hire a person with a disability or from the LGBTQ community, the productivity increases because people are able to, relate to somebody who's very different to them. They want to hear their story, right?
Right.
So, 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 right? right? And the overall absenteeism also reduces because there's the thing that okay, he or she has a disability, they are also regularly coming to office, right? Or maybe working from home. Why should I skip, right? If they can do it in spite of so many troubles, what excuse do I have with my life, right? I don't agree with this thought. This is putting people with disabilities on a pedestal, but it still increases the productivity because people are able to who feel motivated.
Right.
Right? So, the last point is where you are able to see that you are able to change culture, right? Gen Zs tend to stay with your brand a lot more. A lot of companies, and the main question is from all the CEOs and CHROs I've been interacting with, the main question that I get a lot is they give their resignations on toilet papers. They uh, just give resignation on WhatsApp, like, okay, bye, see you. I don't want to work here anymore. So how do you make people stick? The only thing how you make people stick is a bit of empathy, and you have to relate to people, right?
Sure.
People don't want that old concept of roti kapda makan anymore, right? They want Wi-Fi, they want culture, and they want to chill along with work, right?
Absolutely.
So you have to transform that entire culture, and empathy and DEI is the cornerstone of it.
Sure, sure. Thank you so much. So we can safely say that the first step could be to start with honest conversations, and that then can be backed up by actions. Because
Yeah,
policies, they matter, but practices matter more when it comes to having that inclusive workplace. So thank you so
yeah.
much. Beautifully put, Sumit. So this brings us to the end of this masterclass. Thank you so much for your insights. And this reminds us that breaking biases isn't just the tick in the box. It is about reshaping how we hear and value people around us. So, thank you so much for sharing your insights today.
My pleasure, Neha ji.
Thanks a lot, and thank you so much.